Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, however we look today. Great to see everybody here today. Still people rolling in. So we'll get started though. Just remember, everybody, will be recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, please drop off the phone call. And welcome to our second to last session. This was originally going to be our last session of the series. But with the agent topics that are going on, there has been quite a bit of interest, a lot of questions. So we actually decided to add one more for next week. I'm going to drop the link in here once Nick starts to present for the registration for next week. I'll also send an email out to all attendees, everybody I have on the list, around 700 some odd people, for that session for next week. And we're going to do a deep dive into Foundry Agent 365 for next week. This week's going to be focused on Agent Builder and Agent 365 moving forward. So that's going to be today's topic. Um, so one other session coming up is just because it has been quite popular. Lots of different questions last week. Great Q&A going on. Great information shared by Nick. So same format we're going to have. So everybody's mics are muted currently. But feel free, as we get to the Q&A session at the end, to ask questions, or always put questions in the chat as we go too. So we'll be monitoring the chat as we go. And this will be recorded, and you will receive a copy of the recording this afternoon. More than likely, I'll get it sent off today. So you'll have that in your inbox as well. As always, thank you to the team out there. Those of you who may be joining for the first time, my name is Jay Cotton. I'm a Principal Cloud Solution Architect here at Microsoft. My good friend Kevin and Ben also help host these sessions as well. We have tons of recordings from this session, these sessions for this in 2026. We have a bunch of sessions from 2025. I will post all of those recordings, the place where you can get all of them in chat as we go as well, once Nick starts off. We cover amazing topics. I mean, these three sessions that we're doing right in a row here all focus on agent governance, but we've talked about DLP, we've talked about insider risk management, communication compliance, e-discovery, pretty much everything that has to do with Copilot and governing and compliance of it in your organization. So feel free to go back and watch those recordings. Like I said, I'll post that link here shortly so you can see all of them. This is the agenda. We're getting close to the end, which is sad but nice. But don't forget, this is just this particular first go around for 2026. We're going to be doing this again in what Microsoft considers Q4. So that would be right around the April-May timeframe. Not quite sure of the topics yet. I will send a survey out to everybody to see what kind of topics they'd like to cover. When you get that survey, please take time just to fill it out, some things you would like to cover. It'll take you all of 3 minutes to fill out the survey. And that'll come in the email today too. So please take your time there. We may do some repeats as things are being introduced. There's a lot of new things coming out. Anybody who has, well, works with Copilot or works with agents or works with anything else knows that we're changing this pretty much every day now. If not every day, every week, and definitely every month. You can ask Nick, myself. We work for Microsoft, and we are trying to keep up ourselves. New things come every day, and there's just such an ecosystem out there that there's going to be plenty of topics to talk about when we talk about compliance and agents and Copilot and other generative AI products coming up. So stay tuned. More word will come on with that in your emails soon. Other thing I just always want to mention, there is a great sessions going on around just Copilot chat. Copilot chat is one of the things that we can cover via our compliance suite within Purview. So DLP rules apply to it, communication compliance to it. Pretty much every single control applies to Copilot chat. And remember, Copilot chat is that version of Copilot that comes with your Office 360 licensing, not the paid version. Of course, our Purview products also cover the paid version, but this is just for everybody. And these sessions are more about usage of chat. The reason I put it up here is, as a compliance person, as a person who deals with working with, making sure that we're governing and securing our Gen AI products, it's good to see how people use them. So I do recommend jumping in, watching one of these sessions, and seeing what's capable, what people can do with it. It just kind of grounds us into what we should be thinking about when it comes to the compliance piece, because, Copilot chat is a reality out there, and we do need to know what people are doing with it and how we can then use our Purview controls to talk about it. And that's, we've included that in our sessions as well, talking about all these different tools and how we can protect them, whether it's Copilot chat or the paid version. Last thing really to mention here. So all the topics we're talking about, especially this one, so AI governance, or agent governance, Microsoft has learning for all of this. So it can be led by an instructor like Nick, myself, other people. And it goes across, not just agent governance. We have a great agent governance workshop for that, but we also have all the other purview topics as well. These are called onboarding accelerators. I do these all the time, deliveries for customers. So if this is something that interests you, talk to your Microsoft account representative or just email me, jcotton@microsoft.com. If you don't know who your representative is, I can help you find that. We have a lot of, I have a lot of contacts at Microsoft, of course, across whatever vertical you may be in, whether you're healthcare, which is what I'm in, or if you're in financial services or manufacturing, whatever that may be, I can kind of guide you to the right people there. So if you want to do these deeper dives on just one specific topic, like data loss prevention, we can do that, or even e-discovery. All these different things are out there. So please, feel free, take advantage of these. They are offered by Microsoft, and it's something that you can actually take advantage of for you and your team. Most of them are hands-on too. So there's actually labs involved. So you can basically take something in a POC environment and then be able to take that directly over to your prod environment after you do your testing and configuration. So keep those in mind. They're great, great, great workshops, and I teach them all the time. So does Nick. That all being said, I'm going to turn this over to my good friend, Nick Villa. Nick, you have the floor, my friend.
All right, much appreciated, Jay. Thanks, as always. Welcome, everyone, and hope you're ready for a continuation of the discussion that we had last week. We're going to focus our conversation on the continued story of how to govern agents across M365. We're going to do a little brief recap and then jump into today's talking points. And so we'll go through the slides briefly. And so for those that were not able to attend last week, we began the journey of exploring how to govern agents within M365 by talking a little bit about how important this kind of activity and the overall workload of agent governance for organizations is now today and is going to be moving forward. Many of our participants echoed the sentiment that this is an activity and a workload and a set of requirements that has already begun, is well underway in a lot of organizations, although there are some organizations that are just really starting the decision making and the strategy and the policy design that's going to shape the landscape of how agents are used across the business in the coming weeks and months. All right, so it's relevant, hopefully relevant for everybody. And we spent the first 15 minutes of last week's session underscoring why that is the case. We talked about the journey of AI transformation, starting with the co-pilot experience. That's the human with the assistant, co-pilot for every employee, evolving into human agent teams and the introduction of agents that work alongside our employees. And finally, achieving a level or state of human-led agent-operated business processes. We laid out the value proposition and the overall story of achieving AI transformation using this three-stage methodology, using these three phases as a guiding light for becoming a frontier organization. We talked about how Microsoft has been working through that three-phase program of AI transformation. There was a fairly involved discussion. We'll move past it today. Feel free to circle back to the recording for last week's session to get that context. And we use that as a jumping off point to say, okay, we understand agents are going to be the mechanism that allows us to compound, to extend the value of our investments in AI technologies. Putting AI in the hands of every user is the initial value capture. But once we have that first pillar, we seek to extend, to maximize, to multiply, to compound the value even beyond the benefits that we realize when we put AI in the hands of every employee. And that is through the proliferation, the development, and the investment in AI transformation specific to agents that model your business processes. And so we have to have a governance strategy that allows us to embrace that technology shift and that AI transformation program. We have to have the governance and the security guardrails that allow us to embrace that while still meeting the organization's requirements as it relates to data security, to overall IT operational excellence, to best practice design, and to legal security and compliance requirements around the data that these agents are utilizing. And that's where the Copilot control system is the backbone of our administrative tools. And it brings us to the discussion of the 3-zone model for agent governance, which is something that we introduced last week, talking about each zone being a space for certain kinds of agents and warranting and needing unique organizational policy to determine what is allowed in each of these zones and what IT operations we need to put in place to govern them. We talked about Zone 1 being a citizen development zone. We talked about Zone 2 being a partnered zone that involves business users, business champions, business subject matter experts in collaboration with our IT teams working together to deliver solutions to the business. And we talked about Zone 3 being the fully IT managed enterprise development space. And in understanding each of these zones in terms of their purpose, we also need to position the technology solutions that will power the capabilities that each zone supports. And so we have Zone 1, the space for the citizen developer, being able to leverage the services that we refer to as Agent Builder and SharePoint Online agents. We have Zone 2, being the space that is a partnership between business and between our IT and enterprise development teams working together, sharing the technology spaces and building solutions side by side. And Zone 2 being inclusive of both Agent Builder and Copilot Studio. And then we have Zone 3, our enterprise development zone. And I actually was updating the slide to label each of these technologies. And I can see that I actually left off Copilot Studio from Zone 3. So that's intended to show there. Let me just make a quick change and make sure that we capture that. Okay, and so Zone 3 ultimately includes the enterprise technologies that our professional developers are going to want to take advantage of. And that can be both Copilot Studio and Microsoft Foundry. And we understand that, and you know, we acknowledge that Microsoft positions Copilot Studio as a low-code technology platform, but one that has the robust capabilities. Oh, I thought I had fixed that. Okay, didn't end up where it's supposed to be. You guys can understand what I was going for there. We'll move forward. Okay, understanding that Copilot Studio has capabilities that offer value to full code developers. We can integrate Copilot Studio solutions with Visual Studio Code. We can manage them through application lifecycle management processes and leverage Copilot Studio even as a full code developer or with a code-based approach. So there are capabilities that really ensure that Copilot Studio should be considered as both a Zone 2 and Zone 3 technology option. And so last week we talked about Zone 1 first and foremost, and we explored SharePoint Online fairly exhaustively. Certainly, there's a lot to unpack with SharePoint agent governance, more than what I think you can do in about 45 minutes, but we gave it a go. And we showed you fairly quickly a whirlwind tour of the major considerations of governing SharePoint agents in SharePoint Online. And the main takeaway was, when it comes to governing SharePoint agents in SharePoint Online, there's not a lot of unique processes that you need that are different from the core governance of any collaboration workload in SharePoint, right? When we govern collaboration in SharePoint through team sites, we define processes that ensure our team sites use well thought out permissions and manage content in accordance with its sensitivity, and require site owners to maintain permissions via site access reviews and policy configurations at the site level that determine what kinds of sharing are and are not allowed, and some basic configuration of the site to make it presentable for the intended audience. And as long as we have all of that, the enablement of SharePoint agents will fit very nicely into that model, and there won't be a significant level of governance needed that is unique to enabling SharePoint agents that goes beyond the core governance process of SharePoint Online. And that stems from the reality that when it comes to SharePoint agents, those agents are actually just files in the sites, and they're governed through the file lifecycle, the same as any other document or file. They're governed through the permissions lifecycle, as same as any other document or file. And with that said, we did spend some time touring the SharePoint admin portal to show you all that there are a number of administrative controls and configurations unique to SharePoint agents that are worth at least thinking about as an initial policy framework. And that was the focus of last week's session. And so today we're going to pick up with the other major technology platform that spans Zone 1 and Zone 2, and that is Agent Builder. And we call out that Agent Builder is both an opportunity for the citizen developer to bring AI transformation into their own business processes and inject generative AI, large language models, and the power of Copilot into any process that any user owns, is responsible for, or participates in. Agent Builder is a very accessible and yet still quite capable opportunity to allow us to offer to the broad business that opportunity to bring generative AI, to bring the power of Copilot into a unique and contextualized business process that drives outcomes specific to your organization. And so it is a citizen developer tool. That being said, Agent Builder can just as well be an opportunity for the enterprise to invest in AI transformation at scale. Agent Builder does not have to be a solution that is solely positioned for small teams and individual productivity. It can drive, and I have supported organizations. Jay is in the process of supporting an organization right now that is about to release an enterprise-wide or large-scale, at least departmental, Agent Builder developed solution that is going to have significant impact to a large audience of users. We're talking about thousands of users. And so it is an opportunity to consider Agent Builder as a Zone 2 technology as well as a Zone 1 technology. And as we explore the governance considerations for Agent Builder, we're going to keep that in mind. We're going to keep in mind that we're thinking about Agent Builder both from the perspective of being a Zone 1 technology, which means that it is a fairly safe technology in terms of the risks that we have to consider for what users can do with it. Agent Builder is a fairly safe, fairly low risk technology solution that allows users to bring generative AI into their day-to-day workflow, contextualized and configured uniquely for specific processes. However, it is also an opportunity to do things that are impactful. So it's a little bit of both, and we're going to talk through the governance considerations, keeping that in mind. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into our demonstration, and from here on out, we'll just be working through a real-time look at these capabilities and their corresponding governance opportunities. And so we're going to start with a basic overview of the capabilities of Agent Builder. One thing I'll mention is that Agent Builder has gone through some branding evolutions. Okay, it was initially rolled out as Agent Builder. It got rebranded as Copilot Studio Lite. And then somebody decided they didn't love the change and they rolled it back. And we're back to Agent Builder. So for folks out there that may have some familiarity with one or both of those different brands, just be aware they are synonymous, and as of today, the product is built and designed around the branding of Agent Builder in Copilot. And so we have to understand, as far as a user experience goes, it's accessible anywhere that Copilot is accessible to the users. the users can access Agent Builder in the core Copilot experience in office.com. Okay, I browse to office.com. That's kind of my preferred friendly URL to get into Copilot. That's just an entry point in a domain that I've been utilizing since, the first initial iterations of BPOS getting into SharePoint Online. And so we go to office.com, and that brings us into the Copilot landing page. And we have access to Agent Builder from here just by simply selecting the new agent button, which is in the agents menu. In two places, really, both at the top and the bottom. So fairly accessible in that regard. You can also go to Outlook. And from Outlook, you can open the Copilot experience and get to the same opportunity to leverage Agent Builder. You can do this from Teams, open the Copilot experience and leverage the same opportunity to get to Agent Builder. Okay, so anywhere that you're familiar with accessing Copilot, you can do it from the desktop application as well. Anywhere that you're familiar with accessing Copilot, you're going to have the opportunity to access Agent Builder. And we're going to, circle back to the governance just a bit. But first, I want to just walk through the capabilities, right? Because we're positioning this as a Zone 1/Zone 2 technology. And I'm making the case to you all that it is relatively low risk in terms of what the users can do. And I made this case to you all last week as it related to SharePoint agents. And ultimately, my proposition was that a SharePoint agent is ultimately just a configuration file, a JSON file that describes a set of unique instructions, a collection of starter prompts, and a collection of knowledge sources that apply generative AI to a subset of the content within the Microsoft Graph, within the WorkIQ landscape. We scope down, we filter to the most relevant content within the configuration of the agent, and then we utilize the instructions to define a business process. And that is the substance of a SharePoint agent. And the value is not in offering the user a unique and novel set of capabilities, because my suggestion is that anything that you can do with a SharePoint agent can be done directly from Copilot chat with a very thoughtful and well-crafted prompt. And in a thoughtful and well-crafted prompt, you can lay out all of the information that is included in the instructions of the agent, and you can lay out the list of knowledge sources across the Microsoft Graph, across the WorkIQ landscape that we need to focus on, and you can get to the same result just by iterating and prompting through Copilot chat. There's nothing novel about the capabilities there. The value is not in saying, here's a totally new way of using AI. The value is in saying, here's our opportunity to apply generative AI to a specific business process, to have the experts that understand that process implement the logic, the steps, the workflow, and the unique scope of knowledge, and then share that broadly with the business. And the same is true. I'm going to make the same argument about Agent Builder. So let's go ahead and take a look at the experience for creating a new agent. And you're going to see that it feels very similar to a SharePoint agent. I will say there are some differences in terms of what you can do. And so there is a little bit more capability here compared to a SharePoint agent. And in terms of quantifying the IT operations that we need and the governance that we need, I will agree that Agent Builder does require more governance than turning on access to SharePoint agents for the organization. Okay, and we're going to see why that is the case here in just a minute. Now you'll notice when you get into the Agent Builder experience, you have the opportunity to leverage the describe to design Copilot powered configuration process. And I'm actually a big fan of this. I love using the describe to design wizard as the initial step of configuring the agents. Okay, so let's go ahead and utilize that. Thought I would be able to use my microphone, but looks like maybe I've blocked it. Okay, we'll just use chat. Okay, so create for me an agent that focuses on generating marketing project planning documents. Required input from the user is time frame for marketing campaigns and subject matter for marketing campaigns. Okay, this is kind of a use case that we talked about last week. We're just going to walk through the same similar concept in the agent builder exploration as well. And I like this just as an initial configuration option. This is going to give your agent a name, a description. It's going to build out an instruction set as a starting point for you, and it's going to define some starter prompts. And that just saves you a little bit of work in terms of going through the configuration. So once I do that initial describe to design, I flip over to the configure tab and I fill out the rest of the functionality my agent needs myself. And ultimately, you're going to see that the instructions offer you the same capability as a SharePoint agent. And this is really the meat, the substance of the functionality that we're bringing forward, the ability to define the business processes that we're transforming using generative AI as instructions in our agent and then sharing it at scale across the organization. Okay, so the instructions are really part of the major substance here. And I like to let the initial wizard build out a sample for those instructions for me. And then we get to the knowledge. And this is the other opportunity to really dial in the value of this agent by scoping it to individual subsets of documents across the Microsoft Graph. We have the opportunity to utilize any of our SharePoint, Teams, Outlook, and Internet knowledge sources, and we can add up to 100 knowledge sources here. Okay, so really quite broad in the scale. This represents more functionality than we had in a SharePoint agent, where you are actually prompted to focus on just the SharePoint content, right? In a SharePoint agent, in an agent builder agent, we can go a little bit broader in terms of Microsoft Graph knowledge, Teams and Outlook items. I will underscore that it is always, say it one more time, always going to enforce permissions. Okay, the permissions on the underlying knowledge that you include here is always going to be respected in terms of sharing your agent with other users in the organization and having them work through the process, ask the questions, prompt the agent. We will always enforce the permissions that exist on the underlying content. And that is part of the reason why I made that initial suggestion that this can be a Zone 1 technology. It is not possible for users to share information in an agent with other participants of the organization unless they've shared the knowledge of the knowledge sources themselves with the agent's audience. And so the question becomes, as a developer of the agent, do I have enough rights to the underlying knowledge source items to go out and share those knowledge source items with the agent participants? And if I have the ability to go to SharePoint and share those files, folders, and site with the intended participants of the agent, then I can do that. And then I can utilize my agent to give the users a unique generative AI powered experience grounded in those files and folders and content. Okay, so this is always going to enforce the graph permissions, the informations across the M365 ecosystem. And that is part of why I suggest this is a Zone 1 compatible technology. And the other reason why I suggest this is compatible with Zone 1 is because not only do we always enforce the graph permissions, but the only knowledge you can add is from the graph. There's no option to add information from any other knowledge source except for the Microsoft Graph, which is fully permissioned via the underlying security models on the services that we keep track of, right? SharePoint has its own permissions model, Teams, Outlook. These items have permissions, and we always enforce those permissions, and it's not possible with Agent Builder to share items that go for outside of the Microsoft Graph. There is one caveat to this claim, which is the use of Copilot connectors. Okay, and folks may be familiar with Copilot connectors as the evolution of what we refer to as graph connectors. Okay, graph connectors, now known as Copilot connectors, allow us to ingest data into the Microsoft Graph via a service level crawl process. And so via Copilot connectors, we can ingest data that lives in external systems into the Microsoft Graph. Now, my previous claim still applies. With Agent Builder, you can only ground your agents in Microsoft Graph data. And if you've not configured any Copilot connectors, then the Microsoft Graph means only data from SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and Outlook, your M365 services. However, if you have configured Copilot connectors, then that data is also part of the Microsoft Graph and is also accessible to users to leverage in Agent Builder. However, when you deploy Copilot connectors, which is something that only administrators can do, only AI administrators, search and intelligence administrators, or global administrators can deploy one of these connections. And when you deploy these connections, you have to define how the permissions are going to be mapped from that source system into the Microsoft Graph. So these items always come with security. That security is always enforced and respected by Agent Builder. And this ultimately represents the other major concept that allows me to suggest to you all that Agent Builder can be a Zone 1 technology. It only lets users ground their agents in the Microsoft Graph. The Microsoft Graph items always have permissions associated with them. The user experience is always enforcing and governed by the permissions on those underlying items. And so it is a fairly secure and safe sandbox, leaning heavily on the best practices that we recommend to all, that Jay and his team have been sharing with you all around compliance at the service level, through labeling, through data protection, through information protection, through communication compliance, through all that good stuff. The graph content is well secured. And so we can allow broad access to Agent Builder, letting users ground their agents in the Microsoft Graph, ensuring that we're always enforcing security, that every item has security applied, that sensitivity labels can be utilized to ensure that some content is not eligible for generative AI summarization and orchestration, etc. Okay, this is the core functionality of Agent Builder that I wanted to walk you all through. Ultimately, our goal here is not to show you and speak to the value of building agents and show you how to build agents. There is certainly an opportunity for you all to learn about this, and there's a lot of resources we can share in terms of learning how to build agents well. We want to talk about how we govern these things. And so we've identified already the core capabilities ultimately boil down to defining a unique set of instructions, pointing the orchestration engine in the large language model at a subset of the Microsoft Graph data, always leveraging the graph permissions, and never letting the users go outside of the Microsoft Graph in terms of what these agents are looking at. And so the next question becomes, okay, what parts of this do we actually have to govern? We know that we're leveraging and applying best practices that ensure that our Microsoft Graph data estate is well secured. So what parts of this do we have to govern? That generally boils down to how these agents are shared and their agent lifecycle, how we manage and maintain ownership around them, and a couple of other things that we're going to point out, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look in the administrative experience to see how we govern Agent Builder agents. And it brings us to the M365 admin portal, aka.ms/MAC, the M365 Admin Center. And from here, we have a dedicated area which carves out all of the major settings relating to governing Agent Builder agents. And in reality, this administrative area governs a lot more than just Agent Builder agents. It governs all agents within the M365 service, and possibly even agents that go beyond the M365 service. Now, as we get in here, you're going to see screens that talk about Agent 365. Agent 365 is a coming product that will be rolling out in the coming months. It's currently a Frontier-enabled service. And if, as an organization, you've gone into your core Copilot settings and enabled access to the Frontier program for specific users, then those users will start to see the Agent 365 UI, look and feel, and capabilities in their experience in the admin center. But nothing that I'm going to show you today is dependent on or requires that coming product. Everything that I'm going to show you today is available to you as a Copilot customer within the M365 suite. Okay, and so you'll see a few areas and administrative interfaces that are branded as Agent 365, but you don't need to be Frontier enabled. You don't need to plan to be a customer or consumer of the coming product known as Agent 365. This is all core M365 management fundamentals. Okay, and so from within the agents area, the first thing I want to bring us to is just the general settings for agents. Okay, there's a few settings here that are going to be relevant for you all to consider as far as your high-level tenant strategy. Number one, the allowed agent types. Okay, this is a little bit separate from Agent Builder. Okay, there's 3 checkboxes here. Allow first-party agents, agents that are built by Microsoft. This includes things like the CRM sales agents, like agents that we offer called Prompt Coach and Idea Coach. There's the people skills agent that Microsoft has developed. I will say this used to include analyst and researcher. However, analyst and researcher have been reconfigured as core product features. They're no longer governed as first-party agents, and so this particular checkbox doesn't actually govern those. And in particular, what we're talking about with this checkbox and any of these checkboxes is specific to what users can get from the agent store. Okay, so we're talking about things users can go out to the agent store, scroll down to the Built by Microsoft area, and install directly. And if you disable the checkbox that we just showed you, this particular area of the agent store will still be visible, but none of the agents will be able to be installed by the users. Okay, just keep in mind it doesn't actually govern analyst and researcher anymore. Those are governed a little bit separately, but all these other agents will be unaccessible to users if we remove that option in the tenant level settings to limit access to Microsoft built agents. And a similar kind of concept applies to the other 2 buckets, agents built by your organization, which is ultimately going to remove the area within the agent store called Built by Your Org. Okay, and finally, any agents provided by vendors, by second parties, as we refer to them, is governed by the 3rd checkbox. Okay, so you've got the opportunity to pare down the agent store by utilizing these 3 checkboxes, and you can select or deselect these options as you feel is appropriate. So that's the allowed agent types. Next, we get to the sharing. Okay, now the sharing here governs a very specific kind of sharing within Agent Builder. This is specific to Agent Builder. Okay, and I'm going to show you what this governs by first provisioning the marketing campaign agent that we were in the process of designing a moment ago, and then attempting to share it out. And what you're going to see is that this agent can be shared out using 3 different options. The first option being share it to anyone in the organization. That generates a link that can be shared to any employee that can redeem that link, and no permissions are going to be enforced. If you choose this option, it is what it sounds like. The link that you generate here, the link that you generate here can be given to any valid Entra-enabled internal user account, as long as they have a Copilot license, or potentially if you have the pay-as-you-go mechanisms turned on, and that user and the recipient of that link can use your agent. So it is what it sounds like. Then we have specific users in your organization, and this is where we start to define agents that are shared with a particular audience by username or group name. And finally, an agent that's available to only you, that's not shared at all. Okay, going back to the M365 Admin Center, and read this carefully, and it tells us who can share with anyone in the organization. Okay, you have to read the second part of the sentence. The question is not who can share. That's only the first part of what this setting is talking about. The question is who can share with keyword, anyone in the organization. And so what we're saying is that this particular control governs the accessibility of this topmost option. Even if you restrict this particular control to no users, sharing of agents is still accessible via the permissioned option. You can't really turn off the permissioned option. The permissioned option is always here. All you can do is turn off or restrict the global option, and that's what the setting that we just showed you is focused on, turning off or restricting the global sharing option. One thing to understand about how this works is that this is always a link-based pattern. When you use Agent Builder to share an agent, you cannot put that in the agent store. The only way to put an agent in the agent store that's accessible globally is with administrative approval and administrative deployment. If I use the link-based sharing that's accessible to me from Agent Builder, anybody that receives that link will see the agent that they've installed through the shared with you section. But nobody that has not received the link will see that agent in the store and have the opportunity to install that agent from the store. Sharing of agents through Agent Builder is an entirely link-based experience. Even if we choose the anyone selection, and only the recipients of the shareable link will have the opportunity to install that agent. Okay, so that's what the sharing setting governs, right? Which is how do we manage that global sharing mechanism that says, I'm going to generate a link that has no real permissions aside from the user being an internal Entra-enabled, Copilot-enabled user. As long as they meet those requirements, we give them a link, it's going to let them install that agent. Do you want that ability available to the citizen developers? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. You have the option to choose here. Okay, so that's the sharing section. And then we go to the user access. And this represents your opportunity to completely disable access to agents. We do hope that by the end of today's discussion, we have spoken enough sufficiently to why this is a relatively safe and reasonable and approachable level of agent technology to warrant making it available across your organization. But if you're not quite ready for that, or you want to think through it more or get some approvals, go through some reviews, whatever the case may be, you can completely restrict access to agents via this particular setting in the administrative experience. And if you turn this off or put some restrictions on who has access to agents, then anybody that's not in the included group will lose all of the agent related capabilities. And that means they can't create their own agent builder agents, but it also means that they can't use any agents at all, even first party agents, second party agents, agents built by other people and shared with them. It's a very restrictive setting if you do enable that. And you can see what that looks like here. If I apply that policy, and it'll take a minute to enforce, and we'll see that as soon as that kicks in, this entire area of the Copilot experience will be inaccessible to any users that are excluded from access to agents. Okay, so that's the last option that you have here within the core settings. Those are the tenant level settings that allow you to govern Agent Builder, and a few settings that allow you to go beyond Agent Builder in terms of governing first party and third party agents as well. And it brings us to the agent registry. And the agent registry represents your opportunity to monitor for and manage the life cycle of the agents within the organization. And one thing, and you'll notice that this registry represents first party, second party, and internally built or third party agents, all included in a single pane of glass, a single management experience. Okay, so I'll share some documentation with you here that supports the kinds of things that I'm going to show you. I've already gone through the agent settings. This documentation just complements what I just presented as far as each of those controls. And then there's additional documentation that we'll show you around the agent registry. And I just want to underscore that you'll notice in terms of what product we're in, we are not in documentation for Agent 365. Although this is where you start to see those Agent 365 user experiences and branding come forward, this documentation applies to the M365 service, and entitlement is based on having access to Copilot. Okay, so we're going to talk about Agent 365. We're going to put that piece of the puzzle into the conversation eventually. But for now, even though you're starting to see Agent 365 show up here, what we're showing is still something that any Copilot-enabled organization can use to govern agents. And when you come into this registry, you can filter this list by first-party, third-party, or internally built agents. You can filter it by who has access to them. You can filter it by what channel the agent is visible to the users. And finally, you can filter it by what platform was used to create that agent. And you can see that we have the 3 technology solutions that go back to our multi-zone governance strategy available as individual platforms, right? Going back to our presentation where we talked about using Agent Builder and SharePoint Online as our Zone 1 technologies, using Copilot Studio and Agent Builder as our Zone 2 technologies, and then for Zone 3, Copilot Studio and possibly Foundry as part of the Zone 3 methodology, right? And we have the ability to filter this view by each of those platforms, excluding Foundry, which has a little bit of a separate management pane. But we can filter by Copilot Studio, we can filter by Agent Builder, and we can filter by SharePoint to see all of the agents spanning each of those 3 zones. And we can see specifically within Agent Builder every single Agent Builder solution that exists within the organization. From here, there is some management that you might find valuable. The main thing you can do is come in here and choose to block any of the Agent Builder solutions as an immediate reactive governance step if it comes clear that a particular agent exists that is violating organizational policy in terms of its scope or intent or purpose, or the sensitivity of it, whatever the case may be. Okay, so the ability to choose any single one of these agents and immediately block them is one of the key governance activities here that I wanted to highlight. You can also handle the life cycle of ownership for these agents by assigning new owners to them. You can assign yourself as an owner if you want to go into the product to review the agent's configuration. Now, you get some insight into that agent from the data and the tools reporting. On the data and the tools reporting, you can see which knowledge sources are part of the agent, and you can see a little bit of information about the permissions and capabilities that it has. You can also go to the security compliance tab, which links you directly into our GSPM tools to report out or monitor directly on the usage of that agent. So you want to go into DSPM and see who is invoking this agent, how is it being used, what is the nature of the prompts that users are providing to the agent and the responses the agent is providing back to the users. You can come in to monitor that agent activity and start to perform that kind of investigation. So you do have some visibility here in terms of the substance of the agent, but you can't see it all. You can't see the instructions. And sometimes you want to look at files that have been uploaded directly. And in this case, they give you some IDs. You want to go in. So if you want to start poking around directly within the body of the substance of the agent, you do have to assign ownership to yourself and perform that investigation directly from the product experience, which you can do. And so you have the opportunity here to monitor and manage Agent Builder solutions. Now, I mentioned that Agent Builder solutions can be a Zone 1 or Zone 2 technology, right? And so what I've shown you so far with Agent Builder is mostly the Zone 1 capabilities, which rely on a link-based sharing of the shared agent to the intended audiences, users or groups as defined by the owner. how do we define or consider to utilize Agent Builder as a Zone 2 solution? In order to achieve the scalable access of an Agent Builder agent as a Zone 2 solution, we have to request the owner of that agent to access the agent from their Agent Builder experience and export a package which contains that agent's manifest. And so I can take the agent that I just created in the demonstration a moment ago, download that agent as a package, and then as an administrative activity only, move this from a Zone 1 solution that can only be proliferated via link-based sharing from one user to another, to a Zone 2 solution that can be proliferated administratively, deployed across the environments to the intended audiences at scale. And so I'll go back to my administrative experience, choose to upload the custom agent package that was just exported from the Agent Builder UI by the product owner, and then have an opportunity to both make this agent available and also make it deployed to a particular group of users. And this is what allows me to take a Zone 1 agent and move it forward as a Zone 2 agent. Okay, and so I'll go through that deployment process, and now the agent that I've just created is going to become automatically available to any user that I've deployed it to. Now, on the users list, you don't have to deploy it to them. You can simply make it available from the agent store, and that's where the distinction between available to and deployed to becomes relevant. So if we choose available to, then the agent is visible and installable from the agent store for anybody in that group. And then deployed to, a little bit more self-explanatory, agent is installed automatically for this group. And then finally, you can choose to pin the agent as well. And in this context, the agent appears at the top of the agent list for that particular group of users. Okay, so you've got some options here in terms of how visible you want this to be. In my example, I've gone ahead and both made it available to the entire organization via the agent store and also forcibly installed it to one particular user, which is Sonia. Sonia's going to have that agent show up in their user experience within the next few hours, if not sooner. And finally, I could choose to actually pin this agent for Sonia as well if I wanted to do that. And so this is how we take an agent that exists as a potentially a Zone 1 agent and move it into a Zone 2 agent. Now we've got just a few minutes left. I just want to cover off on a couple of more concepts relating to the core governance of agents. We do have a dedicated report within this administrative area, within this inventory, that allows you to identify ownerless agents. And so this becomes one of the more significant administrative responsibilities that as IT, you have to think about what kind of process you want to support. Ultimately, the possibility exists that agents will be built, deployed, developed, and become impactful within the organization, and then the owner who built them will leave the organization or change roles. And so there does need to be some thought put into an intervention process when ownership of an agent needs to be transferred. Okay, how are we going to handle that kind of scenario? And who is going to maintain that responsibility to take action in those contexts? You can treat this as a proactive operational best practice to frequently on a monthly basis review the ownership report for agents missing an owner, and then retire and remove agents that have no ownership, or assign ownership to a new party that's going to take over the management of that agent. So the missing an owner report does represent a straightforward opportunity to jump into that governance decision making. The last thing that you're going to want to really think about as far as administrative responsibility over time at scale is to review the list of agent builder agents that are growing, to identify when an agent builder agent has developed enough impact to warrant additional governance, even to the point of identifying that this might be a zone 2 agent, even though it started as a zone 1 agent. And that's where the administrative reports, the usage reports that I just shared with you in the chat, can really help you dial in. Where are we seeing the most usage as it relates to the agents in the organization? The number of active users or the volume of responses that these agents are generating can serve as your main driver for determining when an agent that exists as a zone 1 solution created an agent builder has to be transitioned to zone 2, not necessarily in terms of deploying it broadly, but at least in terms of tracking the governance, defining key ownership, and evaluating the life cycle of that agent as it relates to its usage and proliferation across the organization. So keep an eye on the usage reports that allow you to monitor that impact these agents are having within your organization. Plan to review these reports on a monthly basis to identify where the most agentic activity is happening for your zone 1 solutions, and determine what is that threshold that you're going to identify to suggest when a zone 1 agent might require a little bit more governance than the user-led, citizen developer-led governance that may have been put forward for it in its initial development. Okay, we are at time here. Hopefully, a very useful and valuable 45-minute overview of Agent Builder capabilities and the governance considerations that should come forward with them. Jay, let me know if there's any discussions that came up in the chat that would be helpful to circle back on as part of the presentation. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to you to close us out.
Yeah, just one question, Nick. I think I know the answer to it, but I want to run it by you too. The question is there anything on the roadmap to allow the creator to request publish and automatically have a publish request go to the admin, such as Copilot Studio has for Agent Builder? I don't believe we have that yet.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
That's a good call out. I'd have to double check specifically for that, but from my familiarity with the coming roadmap investments, the Copilot Studio capabilities are really positioned to provide that approval process, and it is a bit more of a manual process for Agent Builder solutions.
That's what I thought as well. But we'll keep you up to date on that one. Maybe something comes up later this year that we'll have that, and we'll be on another session as well. So great questions, everybody. If there are any other questions, put them in chat or feel free to come off of mute. If not, I want to thank Nick. Thank you so much, Nick. Fantastic presentation. Don't forget, everybody, we have session 3 coming up on agent governance next week. I did drop the link into the chat. I will be also dropping that link in the email today with all the recording links and everything else. I'll also include a version of this deck as a PDF. Thank you all so much for taking your time on a Friday. And again, thank you, thank you, Nick. I forgot to come off camera. And thank you, Nick, so much for the great session. Everybody have a great rest of the day. Everybody have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks all. Cheers.